Hey, Laura J. Michael Seegers here for a bonus edition of the Michael and Laura Show. This one for musicians. We want to talk about not just the power of sound, but the power of music from the perspective of the Ascended Masters. So Michael Seegers is going to represent.
Thank you, Laura. So first, the disclaimer. I'm not a musician. I'm not musically inclined. I played tuba in high school, and just that was challenging enough. I can honestly say I don't feel music the way most people do. I'm very, very left-brained, so I have an understanding of the math and the science that relates to music, and I have information that is uncommon that I'm going to share with you. And so the first thing we're going to do is look at just this is information. Many of you may know this already. I just thought I'd share this with Laura. It has to do with, is your piano or your instrument tuned at A equals 440 or at 432? And mathematically, looking at the harmonics, it's interesting that if you're at 432 hertz, using numerology, adding the two numbers, 7 and 2 equals 9, 108, 1, 0, and 8 equals 9. Everything in 432 hertz numerologically reduces to 9. Now, I can't tell you what that means, but I just find that very interesting. And there are people who have an understanding of what that means. And since everything is vibration and all structure is based on geometry, I think there's a lot of interesting things that you can discover with sacred geometry regarding the harmonics of music and why it may be beneficial to be tuned at 432 rather than 440. And there's a lot of material on that that you can research yourself. I'm not here to speak about that. I just thought I'd point out this little interesting fact. Now, another little interesting fact that a lot of people might not have considered is how music can relate to astrology. And so we see here a chart that I found years ago. And because I'm not a musician, I don't know how to use this information necessarily, but I can tell you that for each sign of the zodiac, you'll notice the inner circle showing the planets. So the sun is the ruler of Leo, Mercury is the ruler of Virgo. So we have the various planets that rule these zodiac signs, and somebody much wiser than myself has determined that these are the musical tones that are associated with those signs of the zodiac. So just something to look at, something to consider for your own personal research, that you might find something interesting and useful by doing that kind of research. And there was a second chart that went into that music of the spheres, wheel number 2. So we get to see here some composers, classical composers, who are associated with these tones and with these signs of the zodiac. So I don't know anymore the name of the book I got this from. It was probably about 30 years ago I made these photocopies, but at least you have them on screen now. You can do a screen print. You can begin to do your own research, just something to consider that may be useful for you. I'm going to share with you now something very powerful. It's a very short video. There is a song, it's about 900 years old in Latin, Ut queunt laxis. It's the hymn of St. John the Baptist. And the sound that's recorded here, I purchased, digitally perfected, mastered in a studio, tuned to the 432 series of vibrations by a master sound technician, and the video speaks for itself. So I'm just going to share that with you.
Sails so many years old.
I was speaking incorrectly. I said 432. That was actually um, tuned to 528, which is the ancient solfeggio tone Mira Gestorum. So in tonic solfa, you have do, re, mi. It is mi. Mira Gestorum in Latin is the tone of mi. 528 hertz is the healing frequency, is the ancient solfeggio science. And that's what that piece was produced in. We showed this at the temple a number of years ago in one of our beginners classes when I was doing a focus on power of sound. And I created a really, really interesting class. And one of the guests, someone named Nico, was floored when we played this. And he came to me afterwards and he said, "You have no idea how that resonated through me." He said, "I'm a sound engineer." He said, "I can feel the difference between that frequency and the normal frequency." He said, "That was fantastic." So it was quite a surprise to me that the guest for an intro class for that particular class would happen to be a sound engineer. Of all times for him to show up, it was so perfect.
Of course.
So we became good friends. Very interesting. So that's just something I wanted to share. I have a couple more pieces I'm going to share with you. The book by David Tame. I consider this absolute must reading for anybody who wants to be seriously informed from a spiritual perspective, about music. David Tame is a student of the Center Masters. He was one of the co-founders of the Teaching Center in London, England. I've read this book. I wish I had time to read it a few more times. It is a phenomenal masterpiece. It's a treasure, absolute treasure. It's available actually. Laura, I can send you. I found it the other day as a PDF.
Beautiful. Please do send. Yes.
To read about the emperor in China having an orchestra composed of 5,000 musicians. You think about somewhere downtown like Massey Hall or someplace where you would go to a concert and they don't even have seating for 5,000 people. How do you have an orchestra of 5,000 musicians? And David goes into the science of music in ancient culture from India and China and back to understanding of the cosmology and the science of vibration and the music of the spheres. It's a masterpiece of work. You can buy this on Amazon. It's a must read for anybody who wants to know in depth, spiritually especially, about music.
That's awesome.
Now, where I got some really deep insight was a number of years ago. There was a piece that was produced. It was a album, 2 audio cassettes and a small booklet, and it was released by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, Summit Lighthouse. It's Teaching of the Center Masters, and it's called The Science of Rhythm for the Mastery of the Sacred Energies of Life. And this is from the booklet, which unfortunately today they don't provide in the DVD. If you go to purchase it, you can't get the original booklet. I have, from my copy, scanned it. I've made a PDF. We're going to go into that today in a little bit. It's going to blow you away. Uses and misuses of the word in the music of East and West, sound, rhythm, and music from the cultures of the world and their effect on the soul and the energy flow of the chakras. And we see how musical instruments correspond to the release of energy in the chakras. The base of the spine is the drum. Seat of the soul is the woodwinds. Solar plexus is the organ. The heart is the harp. Secret chamber of the heart is the harpsichord. And we actually have one of the El Moria songs, Gratitude to Master Moria. The version we usually play is on the harp strings of Lemuria album. The second version we have is done with a harpsichord instead of a piano. It's got a totally different sound. It's very interesting that way. The throat chakra is the brass, the third eye is the piano, the crown is the strings. Perversion of the base of the spine, voodoo, recorded from a voodoo ceremony in Haiti. We have examples of these types of music, or should I say types of sound? I wouldn't even call them music. We have the corresponding beautiful composing. Here we have Beethoven. All these examples are provided throughout the audio files, which you can purchase as MP3s from Summit Lighthouse. And I'm going to go into now what else came in the book. And it was the aura pictures that were drawn by Saint Germain on a blackboard so that we could see the impact of the music let me just reduce this a little bit. So you see the outline, the white figure is the human body. And what you see surrounding Benny Goodman and Gene Krupa playing jazz. And these are the entities that came forth out of the astral plane in response to that music. This, the Beatles song Come Together, and the impact of that rhythm and that sound on the aura. It was an attack. Here we have Got Some Help, Don't Need, performed by B.B. King and D. Clark. So again, that's more of the jazz type of music. And you see the little black demonic entities, the crocodile. This is all stuff coming out of the astral plane in response to that music. This is Silver Apples, I think. Yeah, Silver Apples of the Moon. So this is Aretha Franklin, Respect. Very, very dark. You can see there's a little horned devil sitting there. Very, very dark. This is Jitterbug Waltz. So the jittery energy and the black vertical lines, again, this is not a healthy impact on the aura. No. This one is a Mick Jagger song. This one's called Midnight Rambler. And it's looked like not the kind of thing you'd want. Very, very dark winged entity there.
Yeah. This
is taken from an actual voodoo ceremony. And look what you got sitting here is all this demonic stuff. It's very toxic. And this, the Blue Danube Waltz by Johann Strauss. And when you are playing the classical 3/4 time waltz music, which is the music of the threefold flame of the heart, all the energy running through your four lower bodies, emanating out of your chakras, is now properly balanced, synchronized, and generating a clockwise spiral upward towards your I am present. This is what music is intended to do. This is a healing action that is occurring, and it's purified and it's balanced and it's absolutely wonderful. And that is what classical music is about. And now I'm going to share with you the teaching about classical music. We are told by the masters that it is the misuse of the science of rhythm in these horrific forms of sound that they call rock music and jazz and blues that actually brought down Atlantis, caused the sinking of Atlantis. Rock music is not new to the 20th century. Rock music was used 10,000 years ago. It was used 20,000 years ago. And it absolutely perverted the culture to the point where the Lords of Karma determined that it was an act of mercy to just sink the continent and let the souls reincarnate in a cleaner environment at a later date. What happened was a lot of the souls that were involved in the evil that caused the destruction of Atlantis were held in what amounts to basically a prison environment. They called it the compound. It was on the astral plane. And for 10,000 years, they were not allowed to re-embody. And in the 1700s, the master Ragoji, who we call the Great Divine Director, who is Saint Germain's guru, came before the Lords of Karma and he said, you got all these bad guys in the compound and they're due for release. Their sentence is going to be over in 200 years. In the 1900s, in the mid 20th century, these guys are going to be permitted to come back into embodiment. And you know what they're going to do. They're going to, because none of them have chosen to repent. None of them have chosen the path of light. And their karma is such that they still have opportunities to repent. They still have opportunities to choose light because of God's immense mercy. They have not yet been sentenced to the second death. So they're going to come into embodiment and they are going to infect the culture with their perverted sound, just like they did on Atlantis. And the Divine Director said to the Lords of Karma, I would like to bring into embodiment musical geniuses so that we can create the proper understanding of music well in advance, so that when these guys come out of the compound, at least society will have examples of what proper music is. And the Lords of Karma said, yeah, that's a good plan. Make it so. So in the 1700s and onward, we see tremendous musical genius coming forth. Musical prodigies, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, Handel, Strauss, all these incredibly talented musicians who had been gifted from many, many lifetimes came into embodiment and produced for us the classical music that we have today so that we would understand what is proper rhythm and tone and proper use of music. So we would have a standard by which to judge when the perversion of that standard occurred. And we see from the auric drawings that Saint Germain did how perfectly the energy is in the presence of this perfect sound. So what is coming out of our chakras is intended by our thoughts, words, and deeds to be expressed in a way that creates a clockwise spiral that is ascending back towards the I am present to be stored in the causal body. And every time we choose the left-handed path and we commit error, we take our energy and we drive it in a counterclockwise spiral that moves downwards into the electronic belt. And under the influence of this music, jazz, blues, and rock, and everything that evolved after rock, the heavy metal, the monster rock, the rap, just the vulgar energy, drives your energy in a counterclockwise spiral toward death and destruction. It's extremely toxic to the body physically, to the mind, to the emotions, to the soul, to your whole life's path. It is highly toxic. And it is the science of rhythm for the mastery of the sacred energies of life that presents that in tremendous detail. Now, we have one step beyond that. This is classical music taken to its highest expression. The album is called Harpstrings of Lemuria. I first bought this in the 1980s as a couple of cassettes. Played it literally thousands of times. My kids grew up with this from childhood to their early 20s. This is the only music they ever heard me play. And like I said, I'm not a musical person, but this was always in my car. Whenever I'd go to pick up the kids and have a visit, this was always playing in the car. And the kids grew up to love this. And it is the most extraordinary sound experience. Harpstrings of Lemuria. The masters tell us that consciousness is a chalice with wings, into which is poured the light of the Holy Spirit. And the music of Harpstrings of Lemuria does just that. It is so healing to the soul, it's beyond belief. And just for you, Laura, I thought I would share And you can't get this today because it's not for sale. They sell now as a CD, and they don't include this little thing in the CD. But this came with the original cassette album. This is the music of Harpstrings of Lemuria charted on the cosmic clock. Very few people have ever seen this. This is an extraordinary teaching, showing us how each of the songs fits on the cosmic clock, so that as we study the cosmic clock, we can come into a greater understanding of what is the appropriate sound to have playing at different times. And it's for your God victory on the path of initiation of the 12 solar hierarchies. This is an extraordinary, and I'll just reduce this so that anybody wants to make a screen print. Take that down just a bit more. Because you can't find this on the internet. It does not exist anywhere else. I'm sure I'm the only person today that has a copy of this that is making it publicly available. Harpstrings of Lemuria charted on the cosmic clock. What an extraordinary gift for the students who are looking for this kind of stuff. And then what we have on YouTube, maybe I can go there real quick and show you on our channel. I only found this lecture a few weeks ago. And what I knew to be true was the experience that I had. I fell in love with this music 35 years ago, and my kids fell in love with it. And it had such a powerful, positive impact that I could not explain to people until I found this lecture in which Mother was teaching us what Sanat Kumara had to say about Harpstrings of Lemuria. This is our YouTube channel. So when you look through our videos, you're going to see Harpstrings CD1 and CD2. So this is your opportunity to actually hear the music. I've uploaded the entire 2 cassette albums. So if you buy it today, you only get 1 CD, and it's got some songs from this one and some from this one. But if you go to YouTube, the original full 2 tapes are here. And this lecture, which is only 9 minutes long, explains to you about this music as described by Sanat Kumara. And it will blow you away to discover the healing properties of this music, how it was produced, why it was produced. And now you have the opportunity to access the lecture and the 2 tapes. So the full Harpstrings of Lemuria is available.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. It's really a blessing to have that.
Thank you for sharing that, Michael. And also in relation to the 440 and the 432 hertz that you had shown earlier, I literally watched a video in the last week where it was said that in the 1930s, the tone or the frequency was changed. So the music companies basically hosted a meeting to say they were changing everything, but it was a conference that standardized 440 as the tone instead of 432.
I'm familiar with that. So that was done, yes.
Yeah. So our music was weaponized in the 30s.
Yeah, I try not to use that word in relation to that event. If somebody were to look at a Harpstrings of Lemuria, I think they would find that it is recorded in 440. And so I wouldn't want anybody to ever draw a misunderstanding and think that there was something dangerous in that. I think that was the only possibility they had. This was recorded 50 years ago. Harpstrings of Lemuria, the lecture came out in 1980, so that's 40 years ago, not 50. But back then, they didn't have musicians with instruments to create a full orchestra tuned at 432 and 528. It didn't exist. So this was the best they could produce for the physical plane to bring down the vibration from the spiritual plane at the highest level. And we have more. When you listen later on, I'll share with you the music of the Holy Spirit that we have. Um, can't even think of the name right now. We've got some music that transcends anything you have ever experienced. It begins with the harp strings and is truly heavenly, blessed music. And that's all I've got. I'm, like I said, I'm not a musician. I know a little bit about the math and the science. I've been fortunate to access the teachings of the masters and learn about the science of rhythm and what a toxic rhythm is and the effect on the chakras. But beyond that, I'm not a musical type person, and this is the best I've got for you.
That's amazing. You did perfect. Thank you very much for bringing those insights. I'm sure there will be people who may feel offended or triggered at the notion that rock music, jazz, blues are negative. And so I would be interested to hear your perspective about how they could, is it possible for them to be made positive or tuned
No,
to?
no. Even if you had the finest lyrics, uh, and the Beatles had a few that had what appeared to be wonderful lyrics, but it's the impact of the sound and what is the sound doing, and also what is occurring on the astral plane, what is being attracted by that sound. When you get into who wrote the Beatles music, some people say it's a controversy about Theo Adorno. I've researched. I got Dr. John Coleman's book, Minute 300. Dr. John Coleman was retired British intelligence MI6. He dedicated many, many pages in his book to what was happening at the Tavistock Institute, which was a think tank that was designing programs for controlling society, and how Theo Adorno wrote the music for the Beatles, who couldn't write their own music, and how they used the Beatles as a tool to infect society with a lot of toxicity and introduce the job culture. So a lot of people will go onto the internet and say, "No, that's controversy. That's been debunked." Well, do your homework. You'll discover that a lot of things are going to disappoint you when you discover the truth. Tools for controlling society. Um, so now you get into, and you can research. If you go deep enough in your research, you'll discover about the voodoo ceremonies and how that came in through New Orleans and how it got into the jazz and the origin of all that, which is black magic. It comes out of Haiti. It comes out of Africa. That's indisputable if you do your homework. What the masters have done in the science of rhythm, they produced a lecture through the messenger Elizabeth Clare Prophet. It's several hours in length. We have the first half of that up on our YouTube channel. The second half, YouTube won't put it up because of copyright infringement, because of the samples of music that are contained in there. Other people have copyright to it. But if you go through the first lecture and you want part two, send me an email. People have already done that. I've responded to them. We have a gentleman in Poland. The first day I put it up, he asked for part two. So I gave it to him. I have it on a private server. You can download it anywhere. But it'll give you the science. And based on the teaching, you can go and do your own homework and discover that, yeah, this is true. And this is toxic music and it has very, very satanic, evil origins. And no good comes from it. I remember Mick Jagger was interviewed after the Monterey concert in California. Somebody was stabbed to death by a Hell's Angel biker, and Mick said, "Every time I play the song "Sympathy for the Devil," somebody dies." And he had to stop doing that song because he'd go to a concert, they'd do that song, and somebody would get killed. But you look at everything that the Rolling Stones produced, and it's just darkness. It's just darkness. And there's a lot of stuff out there that, people are addicted to the darkness because of their karma, because their rate of vibration, they're stuck in the astral plane. You listen to the 9-minute lecture on heartstrings of Lemuria, and you're going to get a whole different understanding about the astral plane and your soul and what is healthy for your soul. And you listen to the lectures on the science of rhythm, you're going to get a whole new education on who you are as a spiritual being, what is the impact of sound, and the science of sound. And based on a new understanding, you can really recalibrate what you do as a musician to benefit life on the planet. Because without this information, you're still uninformed. And I'm not saying that I don't mean to irritate anybody. you don't know what you don't know.
Does,
And thank
yeah,
God for the Zen Masters, because they bring us these things that we don't know.
yeah, yeah. I felt like that was a really important point that I should have possibly brought up sooner, but I'm glad that we did it. And this is a conversation starter as well. So if you have anything that you want to say in the comments below for us to speak into again, we can come back. We will be having Michael onto the Mystic Music Summit that is happening every 2 weeks in the production of a compilation CD of 22 songs of a higher frequency, which is part of the reason Michael put together this presentation today. So very much appreciate that. Would love to see what this message means to you, what it means for you, and what you're going to do with it. Hopefully joining the Mystic Music Summits and the compilation CD that we're going to be putting together will be part of what you choose. But ultimately, if this is your first introduction to the teachings of the Ascended Masters, definitely go check out the playlist, The Michael and Laura Show, for more information about higher level teachers than you may have had access to before. So thank you very much, Michael, for today and every day.
Pleasure. Thank you, Laura.